Welcome back, y'all, and happy Monday. Spring practice does start for our Tennessee Volunteers this Friday. We've already talked a lot about different variables in spring practice, what to look out for. Today's video is going to be on some sleeper players that we haven't talked as much about. So, as always, y'all, please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, y'all, our first sleeper will be Jake Merklinger playing at quarterback. He's probably going to be the backup for Tennessee this season. At least, hopefully, he will be the backup, because if he's not, then that would mean that something probably happened to Nico Iamaleava, who we are projecting to be the starter. Now, Jake is an absolute and total stud, about 6'3". He was 215 last season. I would expect that he's going to be up to about 225 this year, looking really thick and solid. And he's a guy that can make all the throws. He can throw on the run from inside of the pocket, throws with great anticipation, but he's also a fast guy. He's a mobile player, so that read option stuff, really any sort of an option inside of Tennessee's offense, he can operate it very, very well. So I'm looking out for him to be a player that some of these insiders and analysts and experts and things like that will be talking about throughout spring camp. Next player is Emmanuel Okoye, who actually plays Leo for Tennessee. That is one of our edge rushers. It's the same position that James Pierce played. Listed at 6'5", 243, about the same size as James Pierce. He's a player that's still kind of new to playing football, but he was a four-star coming out of high school. I believe that he's from Africa originally, but he ended up in London, and that's where Tennessee found him at. Either way, he has all the upside that you could ever imagine in a defensive end, in a pass rusher. Now, as he's gotten more acclimated to playing football over these past few seasons, I think that he's probably going to start to look a little bit better. There's several things that I've seen in his game that I love. Very strong at the point of contact. Again, not really having the best fundamentals. He should be there just because he had a season-ending injury early on last year. So he got the opportunity to kind of watch things more and grow a little bit more mentally with how football looks. So coming back in the spring, this is going to be a really big one for him. If he can give us pretty much anything, man, we're going to be super duper loaded. But I actually think that he's going to be a guy that the insiders and experts will be talking a lot about over the course of spring camp. Next, we have running back Star Thomas, who just transferred in from Duke, 6 feet tall, about 210, probably 215 pounds. I actually watched a video earlier today, coming from Tennessee football, and they were showing us doing the tug of war and all that type of stuff. But I did get to see Star Thomas, and he looks very thick. He might be about 220 or 225. I know that this is something that Tennessee definitely wants to have inside of our offense, and it's critical. But watching what he did at Duke, just, the balance and all that type of stuff that he can bring to the field, I think that he's going to be a great addition to this backfield. And obviously, he's going to be a player that gets to play significantly just because he is transferring in. But he's not a guy that we've talked too much about on this channel. So I wanted to make sure that I brought his name back up because he's another one that I think that all the insiders will be gushing over as we go through spring camp. And next, at a very important position for Tennessee this season and really every season, defensive tackle Jamal Wallace. He's a guy that, man, he's got the size, about 6'2", 6'3", probably going to be close to 320 or 330. P and I have talked a lot about that zero technique, that one technique where Big O and Big E played for us last season and over the past couple of seasons. We didn't really have a guy like that outside of Wallace. So he's a guy that's shown a whole lot of burst and good strength at the point of contact, things like that. I feel like he could have a breakout season. I really do. I think that he might end up potentially earning a starting spot or at least getting inside of that two deep. If he can give us a lot at the one and at the zero techniques, man, Tennessee's defense is going to be tremendous. So he's another one that I think that the insiders will be talking about. Now let's talk about that tight end room. We know that it's very deep for Tennessee, and there are several players that we love inside of that room. But I want to point out Cole Harrison just because as a true freshman last season, he didn't see the field that much. And anytime that he was out there, it was mostly blocking. I think he might have ran him out one time, but he never got any passes thrown to him. But if you watch his high school film, you could tell that he could do everything. Coming from a high school out there in California, you could just tell that he's very, very well coached, runs great routes, has good hands, really good speed, and good size, about 6'5". I would expect that in spring he's going to be close to about 235, if not 240. So he's a guy that's very versatile, and I don't want to skip over him just because of all the other talent inside of that room, but he's definitely going to be one that the insiders will be talking about over spring. And that brings us to another super deep room, our linebackers, and I want to talk about Jordan Burns. Now, P and I have talked a lot about Jordan Burns, so it's not quite the same situation as it being a guy that we haven't too much talked about on this channel, but he's the one that I want to make sure that everyone keeps in mind that, hey, yeah, there's a whole lot of bodies inside of that linebacker room, but 4 or 5 of them won't even be going throughout spring practice. So he's going to get plenty of reps, and he can literally do it all. So with all the versatility, with all the playmakers that we do have inside of this room, I would expect that Tennessee can have different packages, whether that's a 3-4, 4-3, nickel, dime. We should have different linebackers that fit all of those schemes to a T. And Jordan Burns is a guy that can play in any of them at a very high level. So I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing what the insiders have to say about him. All right, in this next room, wide receivers obviously has a ton of question marks, especially with the depth. But I think that all the players that we have inside of the room look really good. So we just need to add maybe another body, maybe two more bodies after spring is over with. But the 2025 class, all those freshmen, love all those guys. We talk a lot about Travis Smith. I feel like he's going to have a great 2025 season. And then Dotson, he's another one that can do a whole lot of things for you, especially inside of the slot. But Redarius Jackson, in that tug of war thing that Tennessee was doing earlier today, inside of Neyland, he looks like he's gained probably 10, 15, maybe even 20 pounds. He looks really good. So I'd say he's probably about 6'2.5", almost 6'3", close to 200 pounds. And he's put on some really good weight. I don't think that he's dropped any speed. If anything, he's probably gained some. And what we saw from him in high school was a guy that can make plays by getting open and by also making something happen after the catch. Tennessee hasn't seen too much of that over the past few seasons, but I feel like Redarius Jackson is a guy that will turn a lot of heads as we're going through spring, and I feel like we will hear a ton about him. Next, let's talk about Bennett Warren, offensive tackle for our Vols. And we told y'all before that we felt like our tackle room would be one of the deepest in the entire country. When we said that, we actually didn't even bring up Bennett Warren. So I had to make sure that we talked about him today. I've been waiting on an opportunity to bring him back up because, man, listen, 6'8", 330 pounds, doing splits, really good footwork, very long arms, prototype for a right or left tackle. He's going to get his opportunity to beat out David Sanders and Jesse Perry and also Larry Johnson for that right tackle spot. So he's a guy that will probably end up as a backup, but he's going to be a very good one. I think that we'll hear a lot of positive things about Bennett Warren over the course of spring camp. Now let's talk about the star position. We already know that Boo Carter's probably going to be the starter right there. Will Jordan Thomas also be playing? We'll see, but I think that a player that we haven't talked too much about playing at star, even though we have done it some, is going to be Marcus Gorey Jr. Now, I don't know if he's going to end up playing at star, if it's going to be corner, if it's going to be safety. He's a very versatile player, but typically the more versatile players you want to have playing at star. What I love about him is his footwork, his patience, his man-to-man coverage, and his willingness to be physical at the point of contact. So for me, he will be a prototype star player, and I think that we'll hear a lot of very positive things about him at whatever position he's going to be playing at in the spring. Sticking with the secondary, let's talk about cornerback. We've talked a lot about Tyler Redmond. I had to continue to talk about him just because I think he's going to be such a tremendous player from day one. And we could probably say the same thing with him as we said about Marcus Gorey and a lot of the other players inside of Tennessee's secondary. Not quite sure where he's going to end up at. In spring, he will get cross-trained. But he's a guy that I feel like will look good wherever the staff puts him at. He understands football on such a high level. He's also going to be the longest player inside of that room, and he can play man-to-man coverage, zone coverage. He will come up and tackle you, get off blocks, and everything that you want with a secondary player. So he's a guy, as a true freshman, that I would expect should be turning some heads, and we'll be hearing a lot about him from the insiders. Now let's take it back to the offensive line. Let's talk about guards. This is another very deep position for Tennessee this season, but I haven't talked enough about Antoni Cade Agumuro, who I think is just an absolutely phenomenal athlete. He's big, he's strong, he's very fast for his size. You know, his burst is crazy. I think he's a prototype guard. Hasn't played that much football compared to some of the other players on this team. But I do feel like as he's gotten up there with the team, with the staff and things like that, he's been practicing more. I feel like he's a guy that should be able to turn some heads. And I'm not saying that he's going to start or anything this season, but I think that we will have more confidence in how the backup rotation looks. And hey, he might get a look at center as well. Now let's talk about Tennessee's safety room, and I'm only going to talk about one today, even though I could bring up several names. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of players that could end up starting right next to Andre Turrentine. So this is a battle for us to watch 100%, and we've talked about that before. But I want to talk about John Slaughter, man. Perfect size, 6'2", about 200 pounds. He can play man-to-man coverage, looks good playing zone, and he will also come down and play inside of the box, does a good job of scraping, takes really good angles, and makes good tackles, fights off blocks, all of that type of stuff. His biggest issue, why I think he hasn't seen the field quite as much, is it sounds like he was having an issue with the playbook. That's something that he should have down to a science at this point because this would be his third year at Tennessee. But we also know about our secondary coaches, whether that's Tim Banks or Willie Martinez, they love to play the older guys. So John Slaughter now being one of those veterans, this is his moment. I think that he could potentially end up starting right next to Andre Turrentine. So he's a name for us to watch, and he's also a name that I think that we'll be hearing a lot about over the course of spring. And last but not least, let's talk about Tennessee's center position, which obviously is so important to any offense, but especially Tennessee's because we run the tempo. They're going to set the tempo. They set up the pass pro, but also because we run the spread, they're going to have to face a lot of one-on-one blocks versus some real dudes inside of the SEC. So you got to be extremely versatile, strong, fast, all that type of stuff, and very intelligent. I think that Nick Moore, as a true freshman, possesses all those tools. He's going to come in at about 6'2", 6'3", 315, 320, something like that. And I'm not sure if he's going to be fighting for a starting spot as a true freshman, but he will be a very solid depth piece for us for sure. Now, just talking about Tennessee's center room as a whole, I feel like William Satterwhite will probably get the start. Max Anderson's also looks very good playing there. And then we also have Jesse Perry, who is a little bit big for a center, but he could probably play there. He's a guy that you want to put on the field in your starting five because I do think he's probably one of our best five offensive linemen on this team. So while Tennessee doesn't necessarily have a starter right here, we're in a really good position because we have so many players. And I didn't even mention Sam Pendleton, who could also plug in and play center for you if you want to move someone else to guard. So love all those things about our center room. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing about Nick Moore. All right, y'all, that's going to do it for all my sleepers to watch in spring practice. Please share yours with me down in the comments section. And as always, please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Peace.